Good evening. I would like to call to order the board meeting for Medina City Schools. If everybody will rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Chambers, if you'll call roll call.
Mr. Hilberg. Ms. Parkhurst.
Here.
Mr. Ross.
Here.
Mr. Skidmore.
Here.
Ms. Pavlik.
Here.
Thank you.
Are there any updates or corrections to the minutes? Hearing none, I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes from the regular board meeting of October 19th, 2020, and the work session of November 2nd, 2020.
I'll second.
Mr. Chambers?
Ms. Pavlik.
Aye.
Mr. Ross.
Aye.
Ms. Parkhurst.
Aye.
Mr. Skidmore.
Aye.
Thank you.
Are there any additions, removals, modifications to the agenda? Bear with me 1 second. I had to refresh. I would like to break out 2 items underneath the superintendent, just to facilitate additional discussion if the board would like to. It's number 9, the membership agreement for Battelle, and number 12, the impact group service agreement.
I'll second that to approve the consent agenda with number 9 and number 12 separated out.
He's right. Okay. Mr. Chambers?
Ms. Pavlik.
Aye.
Mr. Skidmore.
Aye.
Ms. Parkhurst.
Aye.
Mr. Ross.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, at this time, I will turn it over to Mr. Sable.
Good evening, everyone. As I'm sure our board is well aware, and most of our parents are aware as well, we have been seeing an increase in COVID cases within the district. Obviously, that's something we don't want to see. I just sent out a communication to community and parents a week or so ago asking for their support in trying to prevent the spread of the COVID virus, including wearing masks, washing hands, as well as social distancing. In addition, a very important part to the COVID procedures is the health checklist that we ask all of our staff and our students to do in the morning. The best way that we can keep COVID out of our school buildings and keep our school buildings open is to not have our students or staff come into the building if they are experiencing any of the things within that checklist. We have been very fortunate thus far in terms of the cases that we've been having, even with the dramatic increase over the course of the past week or so, that we have not seen evidence for spread within the buildings. And it's because of these procedures that people are taking when they're sending their kids off to school or coming to work that's helping to prevent that. In addition, it's also because of all the procedures that we've implemented across the district, the procedures to keep our staff and our students safe. So it's been much more difficult because of those procedures for the virus to spread within the building. Unfortunately, we have seen spread within some of our athletic programs, and we have had to shut those programs down for the meantime. I anticipate that most of those programs will be shut down for the period of 2 weeks, which is the regular quarantine period. The hope is that we'll then be able to resume practices. The good thing about right now, if there is one, is that the winter seasons haven't quite started. So if we're going to run into a situation where we have to close some of the sports for a period of time, now's the better time to do it than it happening in the middle of the season. This has also impacted our middle school sports as well. We have seen COVID cases on our middle school teams, and this has resulted in us closing our middle school athletics altogether, again for that same 2-week period until further notice and we can see that the COVID cases are decreasing. The reason why we've made this decision at the middle school level is because, again, our goal is to keep our students in school. And if not moving forward with athletics at the middle school level will decrease the chances of students not being able to come to school, I think it's a sacrifice worth making in the short term. I do hope that we will be able to resume all of our middle school athletics as well as all of our high school athletics before too long. I did want to share with the board a little bit of an update in regards to what we've been seeing in terms of COVID cases and how it has been impacting the district. We have, over the course of time, been seeing an increase in COVID cases that is very similar to the charts that you see at the state level. And the chart I wanted to share with you is specifically staff. And unfortunately, I don't have it to put on the big board, but you can see the green lines on the TV and how the green lines are dramatically going up as we're approaching the present time. This chart not only represents COVID cases, but it also represents quarantines because quarantines actually are much more impactful on the district, believe it or not, than the COVID cases. And that's because it's the amount of people that it impacts. When we're making decisions about keeping buildings open or going online, which we made that very difficult decision for the high school and route last week, one of the major factors in that is staffing. If we don't have teachers in the classroom, if we don't have cooks in the kitchen, if we don't have custodians to do the cleaning within the buildings that help keep our kids and our staff safe, then we can't proceed with school in session. And that's the situation that we had run into at both Root and the high school. In addition to that, when we start seeing a large number of students on quarantine, we have to start asking ourselves what is the best way to deliver academics for all students. And when we're experiencing classrooms, in particular at Root, that might only have 3 or 4 students in them, you've got the majority of the students at home. So a better delivery model to reach all of those students would be through online instruction. I do want to commend Jim Shields and our Human Resources Department. Just this morning I was talking to area superintendents, and you can imagine that districts across the county are running into these very same issues. If you saw the cover of the Gazette today, you see that Brunswick is actually having the same kind of conversations that we're having here in Medina and having to make some of the same kind of decisions. I commend Jim and the HR department because of the job they've done to get coverage for classes. Our coverages in our district aren't good, but they are higher than what I'm hearing from other districts. And I think that's really a credit to the way we have our system set up, where we handle our substitutes internally, so we can work with people to recruit to get them into the classrooms. Although we have a higher coverage rate, another thing that we consider in regards to keeping a building open is what is happening academically within a classroom when there's a substitute in there. Now, we do have high-quality subs, and we're appreciative of all of our subs. But when we run into situations where we have advanced level courses and we have individuals, substitutes covering those courses who don't have the training to teach them, again, we ask that question of how well are academics actually occurring in that class. We did have a situation last week where we had approximately 15 teachers that we weren't able to cover with a substitute. So what happens when we can't cover a class with a substitute is we period sub. So we find teachers that are on their plan, and we pay them to cover the class for that period. In those cases, it's very unlikely that much instruction is occurring in that class, and it's simply because that teacher doesn't even know until that morning or even later that they're going to be covering for a class. More recently, the situation has become even more difficult where principals, associate principals are regularly covering classes. I know Brian over at Canevin actually spent all day today teaching. So we're fortunate to have high quality educators at all levels who are able to step in and do that. The challenge when that happens, though, is then we lose the administrator who's trying to operate that building for the day. My hope is that we can continue to keep our other buildings open, and as stated in the letter, come November 30th, we'll be reopening the high school and Root Middle School. I did want to share with the board, though, I met with Mr. Shields as well as Dr. Kowalik this afternoon to take a look at the district as a whole. Although closing the high school and Root has provided some relief in terms of subs, we still have 3 buildings that are on, I'm just going to call it a watch list, that are kind of teetering on the level of having a large amount of staff out. And one of those is Canevin, the other one is Heritage, and the third one is Blake. In those 3 schools, we've seen an increase in cases and an increase in quarantines. I also wanted to share in terms of the numbers, going back through August, September, and early October, we were just looking at 2-3 cases a week that we were sending communications out for. In the last 2 weeks, we've had communications on a daily basis. Today, and these numbers do include cases over the weekend, so I think that's important to mention. We had 4 student COVID notifications go out and 7 staff student notifications go out. So these notifications are people that are actually positive. This number doesn't include all the quarantines that may have resulted from these staff members being absent from school. So having 12 on a single day, we had a couple days last week where we were at that number, or at least very close to it. There wasn't a day last week that some sort of notification didn't go out. We are adjusting. We're going to try something a little bit different in terms of notifying our parents about the COVID cases. We are mandated per Governor DeWine's order to provide 2 forms of notification. One is at the classroom level and one is at the building level. Right now, we've got such a high level of cases. This evening, actually for the first time, I'm going to send out a district-wide notification indicating the buildings rather than sending out 6, 7 separate building notifications, so that everybody gets a better idea of what's happening in regards to cases within the district. We will continue to send out the classroom notification. So if your child is within a classroom where there is a positive COVID case, whether it's a staff member or whether it's a student, you will receive a personal email from me notifying you of that situation. We have been making great strides in regards to updating many of our academic procedures. And I asked Mrs. Cassidy if she would share with us some of the updates that have been being made. One thing that we emphasized early on is that this is our first pandemic and we're learning along the way. And so we are trying to make adjustments so that we can better academically serve our students. So Tina, if you wouldn't mind sharing some of the updates you've been working on with the Leadership Committee.
Sure. So today I wanted to share with you a resource that we've actually put together for parents that kind of outlines all the changes that the Leadership Committee came up with. And we did add in hybrid. You'll see it's called MCS Online 3.0, but we did add in a hybrid tab at the top. As we are preparing for any eventuality, we don't know what is going to come. We just want to make sure that we're prepared. So can you click hybrid for me? The high school's already been operating under a hybrid schedule. We just wanted to make sure everybody was prepared in case we ended up having to move that to middle school and elementary school. At the high school, students are placed in either a gold or green group, and they have an alternating schedule, so they are gold and green days. The kids come on their days, and on their off days, they do work that is assigned by their teacher. So I did include the gold and green schedule, the calendar that was sent to the high school. I do want to note that although the colors start November 23rd, that doesn't mean that our entire district is going hybrid on November 23rd, because that was a misconception we had last week. That just means that whenever you can see the colors run throughout the year. So whenever we would be called into hybrid, whatever day that is, that's the color we would go to. So that's just a resource for you. So that is on the website for all parents. We did want to make sure that it was the same as the high school's hybrid schedule, so that if you have kids at different buildings, they're all the same. They're all on the same schedule, so we don't have kids at different schedules. So that is where you can find the hybrid. And I'm not sure if I said this already, but if you wanted to see this resource, it's on our main page website. At the very top, there's a Online 3.0 tab that you can go to. Oh, Ryan's going to show you. So it's right there. It's right on the home page of our website. And then if you want to click onto the, click on middle school next. I'm going to go over some of the changes that we made to our online, we're now calling it 3.0. Earlier this year, I presented on the results of our surveys, and what our leadership committee did was took those results, and we made some changes to our online program. And the biggest change is the number of instructional minutes that students will be logging in every day. So I'm not going to read through all of this. You can kind of read through all of this, at your leisure. If you want to scroll down a little bit. So basically, this is what the schedule is for Root. I only put Root up at the middle school right now because they are the only ones in Online 3.0. In the event that Claggett would move to Online 3.0, I will also put Claggett's schedule up there, but it is basically the same. So at middle school, students will be following a modified schedule. They'll be spending 30 minutes at every class, except for their period and a half classes, which are math and ELA. Those will be 50 minutes. So they would just follow their schedule. It's all laid out for them. And they would do that 5 days a week. And there is, I believe, a 10-minute break in between classes. They were calling that a brain break. But that was basically the biggest change at middle school. And then Ryan, if you want to click over to high school. Yeah. So high school 3.0 looks a little bit different than middle school, in that they are going to follow a 40-minute schedule every day, 4 days a week. And then the fifth day is what they're calling conference hours days. So where we had office hours before, and office hours were 1 hour a day for ELA, 1 hour a day for math, 1 hour a day for social studies. Now kids have the opportunity to have office hours with their teachers all day long, whatever period they have. So Teachers will be on call. They'll also be calling small groups of students during this time as well. But they'll be available for students all day long because they don't have multiple classes all trying to reach them in the same hour. So again, 4 days a week, they'd follow their regular schedule. They log in. Teachers will teach their classes. On the 5th day, it's a conference hour. And students that are not called for a small group during that day or do not need to meet with their teacher, they will have work assigned for them that they will be working on that day. So those were really the major changes that were that have taken place in our Online 3.0 program. Are there any questions?
Tina, I did want to thank you for the video that you put together last week and sent to the parents. It was very, very helpful, so thank you for taking the time to do that.
Oh, absolutely. That video went to high school parents, and I believe it was made available for middle school parents as well, but we'll make sure that's on the web.
Tina, I just want to thank you for coming up with this revised schedule. I think just, and for the other board members who have high school students, I could already see a difference just in that one day, just how much more structured, how much more involved, I don't want to say happy, kids being happy in school. No, he was. I think it's a great opportunity. I know we talked about this a few times in curriculum committee as well, and I like it that it's go ahead, we're going to give it a try implementing it, because we won't know if it'll work unless we try. So thank you very much for going through this.
Absolutely, and I want to say that it was the teachers that really came up with the schedule. They did a great job coming together, combing through all that data from the survey, and really wanting to make a positive change. So. Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cassidy. And you can see we've not only tried to improve the models we've had in place, but also be proactive in making sure that we have options as we have to make these decisions. And that's actually my last discussion item. We do have the holidays coming up. This is a big conversation amongst school districts in how to handle the holiday season. One of the reasons why I asked if our leadership committee will put together district-wide hybrid is because our goal is to keep our buildings open. And if we're able to continue to keep our buildings open with a 6-foot spacing for our students, so increasing the safety measures, that's our goal and what we're going to try and do. And again, I'm pleading to the community again, but we really need people over the holidays to step up. And I know it's difficult. We made the hard decision in my own household. I was actually just last week in contact with my brother and parents that we're all doing our own thing this year. I'm sure we're going to jump on Zoom at some point during the day. But it's important that we prevent the spread so that the schools can stay open. It is a fact that the increase in cases that we're seeing, not only here in Medina, but countywide, is a result of Halloween. Some of the larger quarantine cases and COVID student cases can actually be traced back to Halloween parties. At the elementary level, we're seeing it more with sleepovers. I am concerned that if we don't step up over this holiday season, that we're going to be in a position where we could be all online as a district for the reasons that I mentioned at the beginning of this evening. And besides that plea, I just wanted to take a moment and see if there were any questions from the board or comments from the board in regards to handling the holiday season. One of the things that we've really been struggling with is being preventative so we can have all our students in session post-holiday season, similar to what the colleges are doing, versus doing our best to just keep kids in session. I we're struggling with this decision. It's not an easy one. I do have a meeting tomorrow morning with the Medina County superintendents as well as the health director, and I have no doubt this is going to be an agenda item for discussion, especially with the news that's recently been coming out of Brunswick and their challenges as well. And as of last Tuesday, I'm not certain where things are at now, I can guess, but as of last Tuesday, Brunswick area and the Medina area were the two areas by far that were seeing the most cases. And yes, I'm sure some of that has to do with the size, but it's also the percentages as well, increased of positive percentages as well as quarantines. And I didn't know if the board had any feedback tonight, but if you don't, I'll definitely be reaching out to you and asking you to provide me with feedback as well. And I'll keep you informed as we're trying to move through these difficult decisions. And maybe we'll see things start heading in the right direction. We won't have to make them.
I just had a question, and it's something that I've been hearing a couple times, and it was about, and I don't know if there's any data to prove this, so I'm just getting your take, that the flip-flopping between the online and in person, wouldn't that be more stressful for not only the students but the staff? And so some people were questioning, why don't we just shut it down and just go online the rest of the year until this virus gets under control?
Yeah, I personally wouldn't advocate for shutting it down the rest of the year. I do agree that those transitions are less than perfect. Our staff, what we've seen from our root staff as well as our high school staff, is they've really done an outstanding job making that transition. And like Ms. Pavlik had mentioned, I mean, it really is a beefed up just in day one. This is the first day they've been online, that they've been able to go ahead and run with it. I do believe, though, that if we do make a transition, we need to make at least a 2-week commitment to that, so that we're not on a weekly basis making changes. So if those decisions are made, and we've gone with the 2-week period simply because that's the length of time that typically people have to quarantine. So the thought is that if we did switch online for 2 weeks, at the end of that 2 weeks, we'd have a large amount of those people that would be returning back to session. But if we can keep our students in school, I think that's something I would like to try and do. My concern right now is just the holidays. If we didn't have Thanksgiving in a week and the other winter holidays coming up in a matter of 4 or 5 weeks, I wouldn't even be bringing this up. But what I've seen from Halloween, I'm greatly concerned with what I think are traditionally bigger holidays coming up in terms of gatherings and how that's going to impact the district. And that's why I said that right now it's balancing, and we do have 3 other buildings that are teetering right now, but it's balancing the preventive piece so we can have everybody come December or January or whatever those dates are, and being proactive versus staying the course.
Okay, I just want to make it clear. I'm not being negative. I know you're doing everything you can, and the staff is. So I just want to make that really clear. I'm just relaying some comments I heard, so. But thank you.
No, and I appreciate that feedback, because I do talk to parents on a daily basis, by phone or by email, and there really are a lot of different perspectives from parents. And we have very early preliminary numbers in terms of the MODA, because the MODA sign-up sheet went out last week. And currently, it looks like numbers are going to stay fairly stable, meaning we were concerned about having a large amount of students returning or going, and it looks like it's going to, we do have some transition, but it looks like it's not going to be too drastic, at least right now.
The only other positive thing to add to that is, between the announcement last week and then the announcement this week of, well, last week was Pfizer with the 90% effectiveness in the vaccine, that we don't know the date that'll be available, but then today with Moderna's 94.5% effectiveness. And I heard on the radio, I don't know if I can trust it or not, but there could be as early as, the next couple months that the vaccine would be available, obviously for first line people in healthcare, and then it would go through. So those are some positive things that there's definitely, hopefully this isn't going to be years of this, going through this. So that's good. That's I think, something that and I think it also shows that it's good that we've had the protocols to be as safe as possible to try to slow the spread. Unfortunately, I agree with everything Aaron has said, that I'm sure that the spread has been through these informal events. A lot of people, you'll even hear stories of people that are very careful so often, and then all of a sudden they'll have another family over, another couple, and nobody wears masks, and before you know it, somebody had symptoms and they, realized they needed quarantine and so forth. So people do, they're very careful for so long, and then all of a sudden they just think it's okay. So it is tough. It's difficult if and I know it's not, but it's difficult to have the governor or, say, hey, don't celebrate Christmas, or nobody's saying that. Nobody's saying not to celebrate holidays, obviously, or to have family. And I think a lot of times you never know how many more holidays you'll have with that family member. So it is important to still maybe do some of those things. But again, we have to be so safe on how we do it. And obviously our first job is to safely educate children and to keep our employees as safe as possible. So I agree with what you're doing, Aaron. I know it's a balancing act, and I think you've done a great job this fall with it. And I just wanted to point out that I think there's some real positive information coming down the pike soon. Thank you.
Just to reiterate, we just need to do things safely. We just need to have safe behavior. I think Ron was on the call with us last week with the Alliance for High Quality Ed when, the Alliance for High Quality Ed, when Lieutenant Governor Husted came on and gave a warning that if the trajectory that we're on continues, that we will overwhelm our healthcare system in the next month. And that's frightening. So I think we just need to all take a look at our behavior, what we're doing, and you can still see family if you do it safely. Just wear your mask and try to keep your distance. Mr. Sable, I did have one question. When you were talking about the letters that go out for the classrooms, I know it's been reported in the paper and whatnot that the health department is overwhelmed with their contact tracing. And they're recommending that if you know you've been exposed to a positive case, to reach out to people that you possibly have been in contact with to let them know. But regarding those classroom letters, the health department is still doing contact tracing, correct? Because I think there's been some concern that if a person gets that classroom letter, they may not need to isolate or quarantine. They will hear from the health department, correct?
They're actually, we have made an adjustment as all school districts in the county. You're absolutely right that the health department is overwhelmed, and they're doing the best they can in order to keep up. And we as school districts in the county are stepping up to provide the health department assistance within our schools with that process. So the answer to your question is yes, we're still doing all the tracing, but you might hear from us instead of the health department. And the health department is still in the background and being informed of what's happening, but that actual communication piece we're trying to take off of the health department's lap to try and free them up a little bit so maybe they can have more attention with the community aspect. Because I know the schools and the amount of contact tracing that occurs in schools can be overwhelming. And I know we have some administrators that it's been almost, if not a more than full-time job. Typically, we're not just doing the tracing throughout the course of a day and the week, but we're also doing it on the weekend. So it's an ongoing, constant thing.
I would just like to add, in Mr. Sable, as we discussed in depth last week, that with the Halloween gatherings that occurred, those often tend to be rather larger events. especially with the teenagers and stuff. There could very easily be 30 students at one Halloween party. Whereas with like, say like a Thanksgiving, you're not going to have, most people don't have the 30 people there. But again, it's the difference between 30 students gathered in a party atmosphere versus maybe 5, maybe 10 of family members, and just how they handle themselves differently, like mentioned. So when you talked about going to the online for these 2 weeks to flush the quarantines out and to, 'cause what is it, for symptoms, onset of symptoms within the 2 weeks. So this will move us past that Halloween timeframe. And then hopefully, fingers crossed, on November 30th, when they go back into the buildings, there's 3 weeks between until the Christmas break. So that would be another good test to see, again, how that Halloween holiday interacted. And Ron, to answer your question as far as flipping, I think, and to give the Tina and the curriculum department, Mina, tremendous accolades for really streamlining the ability, and the teachers, how they've streamlined the ability to be able to move to online and have it be almost seamless. I think the transitions back and forth, given on a 2-week time frame, is a great approach to it. Because also, too, and we've discussed like sleep schedules for the students, and they do change. Sleep schedules do change between when students are online versus having to come in physically into the building. So I think approaching it with the improved format, a lot more instructional time during the day with the online 3.0 for the high schoolers. I think we're learning as we go and making the improvements, and I think it's a great approach that they have come up with. Thank you. I know it's been a lot of work.
And that's all I have, if there's no more questions or comments.
At this time, we will turn it over to Mr. Chambers.
Yes, thank you very much. I'd like to tell you that the district bank balance is up, but it's not. It's down $4.5 million to $79 million in October. This is $4,147,000 below last year at this time. The general fund revenues were below last October by $394,000, and this is a combination of state foundation, which is our state aid, and other funds, which basically is our interest income. Our general fund expenditures were below last October by $484,000. Purchase services and capital outlay contributed to this decrease, which is a good decrease. The sales tax fund balance is up to $3.8 million. The district spent approximately $276,000 in October. We received $900,000 for our third quarter revenue. And the largest portion of expenditures was on district summer paving and route locker bay conversion. The rec center capital fund balance is down to $197,000. The district spent $15,000, and we received $14,400 from the city. The district also overbilled the city by $6,000, and we had to pay them back. So we're sorry to the city for that, overbilling, but thank you for letting us have that $6,000 to begin with. We received $51,000 in investment income for October. The total collected for the current fiscal year is about $340,000 short of last year at this time. Fiscal year 2017 was the last time the district has seen its investment income this low. And finally, the district general fund true days cash estimate is 240 days. This is down from September by 15 days and below last year by 22 days. Questions on the finances? Thank you. 5-year forecast. I always start this out by saying this first paragraph. school districts are the only government agency in the state of Ohio required to create and submit a 5-year forecast. And if Ryan would want to turn to the second from last page, everyone could see the 5-year forecast. The forecast is created based upon current information and a number of assumptions, as the forecast is only good for the day it is created. Changes made by outside forces will always be an influence on the forecast. There are 3 main sources of revenue that will be affected throughout the forecast. These sources are real property taxes, unrestricted grant and aid, which is our school funding, and investment income. The real property tax revenue looks stable as a result of the passage of the substitute levy in May of 2018, with collections beginning last calendar year. This levy allowed for a continued funding of $6.6 million to the district. The passage of the substitute levy allows the district to continue to move forward with the strategic plan that was approved by the board in June of 2017. The School Foundation Fund, which is the funding from the state for school purposes, has been placed on hold by Governor DeWine. The beginning of this biennium was based on the monies received in fiscal year 2019. We are currently in fiscal year 2021, so you're talking 2 years ago is where our monies were at. As of May of last year, the governor reduced the funding by $1.5 million. The district is currently receiving the funds based on this reduced amount of funding. The district is assuming these funds will gradually be brought back, but not until after the forecasted period. Also note that there is not an assumption of a passage of a new funding formula, as full implementation of this would not be out until 6 years from now. Investment income of the district has been affected, as businesses have been affected by COVID. The federal government has responded by lowering federal fund rates down to 0.05%. This reduction has made rates for CDs, which are the most prevalent of school district investment purchases, lower, and together with lower cash balances will lead to much lower investment income for the upcoming years. This reduction is reflected in the forecast throughout the remainder of the forecast. The district assumes increases in expenses for the forecast moving forward. We assume all personnel will remain with the district as the retirement systems increase the years required for retirement. Costs of tuition and utilities are anticipated to increase. Supplies and material costs of the district are anticipated to remain steady but fluctuate as the years go forward. The plan provides additional academic opportunities for students K-12, and these are reflective on the strategic plan that was passed. These opportunities for the students are reflective throughout the forecast. Line 7.02 shows the cash balance for the general fund and the substitute levy. As can be seen, the forecast shows the yearly reduction in the ending balances as programs and services of the strategic plan are implemented and as the effects of the COVID-19 virus and the governor's reductions take place. With the passage of the substitute levy in May 2018, the district stated that no additional funding would be requested until it is needed. This current forecast shows the district estimates it will not need additional funding through an operating levy until the last year of the forecast. The district is currently in the process of determining cost-saving measures in an effort to keep the request for additional funds through an operating levy to 2024-2025. It is important to note that if cuts continue from the state, the 5-year forecast and any additional cost-saving measures will need to be reviewed further. Finally, the 5-year forecast. I want to tell you it's like a dartboard or an archery target. The first year of the forecast is like throwing to the regulated the board. The second year, the distance is moved back about double. The third year, it's almost moved back triple. As you move farther away from the current year, the ability to accurately predict becomes much more of a lucky throw. History of revenues and expenditures provide a guide, but just as this past year has shown, there are plenty of outside factors that can have major impacts on even the best of forecasts. So if you have any questions, please ask now. because otherwise, the forecast is not going to be good tomorrow. Thank you.
We appreciate you doing that. You've always been very accurate on your forecasts, and that's important, that a treasurer is good at them and accurate at them. And Mr. Chambers, as long as he's been here, has always been very accurate with your forecasts. So we appreciate it, and it is important for districts to know what money they're going to have in the future. So we appreciate all the hard work you do on it, and thank you very much.
I agree with Rob. You do appreciate all your hard work on this. And he's right. You are very accurate. So whatever, prognosticating you're doing, continue. But I do have a question. You said something about the money that was taken from us in the beginning of this fiscal year, I think $1.5 million. You're saying it's going to get paid back?
No, we're assuming that they'll bring it back up to that amount sometime in the future.
That's the foundation?
That's the foundation, yeah.
Okay. But there's not, it's not 100% positive. You're just,
Oh, no.
okay.
No, it's not.
Okay. Thanks.
Right now, as I say, we are running at the level that the governor cut us to last year. And the assumption is as the economy picks up from the COVID pandemic, as it picks up, the state will in turn increase the monies coming to school, but it will be biennium by biennium and not year over year. So we lost 1.5. The assumption last year that we used in May was that we'd give back approximately half, maybe with the next biennium, and then approximately half of that with the third biennium. So
Okay, thank you. Are you going to share this with the Finance Committee?
on Wednesday.
Wednesday, okay.
Yep.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Chambers, it looks like this was the new software that was used for the forecast?
Yes, this is the new software.
Very good, thank you. And I also just want to mention that the board is approving the completion of the forecast. We're not approving the actual numbers.
Correct.
Thank you.
And Mr. Chambers, I just want to remind the community that the Finance Committee meeting is open to the public. If there's any interested community member who would like to attend, they are able to come, correct?
I believe all our committee meetings are open to the public, yes. That would include education, finance, facilities.
Okay. So I would definitely welcome any community member who may have a question on the forecast or any other of the financials to drop Mr. Chambers an email just to let him know that they would like to attend the Finance Committee, perhaps which areas they might like additional information on. And again, the doors to the committee meetings are always open.
I think we do just need to note that we're limited to 10 per the governor's restrictions on public meetings.
Okay, at this time, I would like to ask if there are any board communications.
Just last week, we did OSBA with their convention, except this year, instead of going to Columbus, it was all virtual. So we sat through classes. I sat through things Sunday afternoon, about 2 or 3 on Monday, and I think 2 or 3 on Tuesday as well. So a lot of good classes, a lot of good legal updates included in that. And that was available for the board and any administrators that wanted to be on there. But again, we did those through like a Zoom type situation this year. Also had the opportunity of going to several of the playoff games for the boys soccer, and Coach Simon had a great year with the boys, and I want to congratulate him. We just were very close to getting down to Columbus for state this year with the boys soccer, but he did an excellent job with the program, and the girls had a great year. And the football team had an incredible year this year, going further than I believe they have in the history of the district, if I'm not mistaken. So congrats to Coach Laird on that. So we are keeping busy. I know there was some comment or something today about public participation here at our board meetings, and somebody acted like we had recently changed our procedures on that, and that's a total false information. Our procedures, as far as I know, have been the same that they are currently for the last several years. And our procedures for public participation are really not custom written procedures that the policy committee does. They're really promulgated by Neola, which is Northeast Ohio legislative assistance that we get, if that's the correct name. It's a subscription that we have. There's two companies that do policy. One is OSBA and one is Neola, and this district subscribes to Neola. So the manner in which we ask the public to handle addressing the board is really more of a standard process with that. But there was some misinformation put out there, and I just wanted to address that. So we always welcome the public. If the public has questions about any of us individually, they're welcome to email us, and I know all the board members here try to respond to those if they can. I know we got a lot of emails prior to the decisions made this summer going into the fall from individuals and from staff about what would happen this fall. And I know a lot of the board members take time to read those and try to look at them and try to respond to people. So I just wanted to comment on that. So thank you.
I just wanted to echo what Rob said about the conference, the Capitol Conference. Had a chance to attend a couple classes, and there's more I want to watch. We have until, I think, the 31st of December. So unlike last year where you attend and then it's done, now we have a couple months to watch these. So that's always good because, you know, I can't sit in front of a computer too long or I get fried. But anyway, so that was good, the OSBA conference. I also want to piggyback off of Rob. The student athletes did have a great year, but I want to add the cross-country team. Milton, the boys' cross-country team, went to state and represented the school district, and that was fantastic. And we also had one of the girls represent the state. I think Jen Rosavi was there and did very well. So proud of the student athletes, the ones Rob mentioned, and their cross-country kids. And lastly, I wanted to say that on Thursday, the rec center's going to meet. I don't have any information now, but since the leadership change, Chris and I will be attending that meeting, and we'll get more information about goings on at the rec center at our next board meeting. Thank you.
OSBA conference, it was, Mr. Ross mentioned that we're able to continue watching till the end of the year, which is nice because several times there's two sessions at the same time I want to attend and I'm unable to when we're down in Columbus, so it's nice that now I could attend one and then watch the other one later. I did attend classes similar to Mr. Skidmore with some policy updates, legal updates, also some sessions on equity. And one thing that I thought was interesting I wanted to share with the board, I don't know if anyone has ever seen this graphic before, and thank you, Mr. O'Cole, for pulling that up. But what was interesting in the session on equity, they were talking about barriers to students. And in this graphic, in the first picture, the barrier is an actual physical barrier. There's a fence. And there's 3 students that want to watch the game. And by giving the students equal assistance, you can see that some of the students are then able to accomplish their goals and see the game, but one student is not. It's not a one-size-fits-all. With equity, you give each person exactly what they need to be successful. And in that second picture, you can see that they're all able to watch the game. But the goal should be justice, where those barriers are removed And that then provides the opportunity for everyone to get what they need. And I just thought that was an interesting graphic. Sometimes there's confusion between equality and equity, and I thought this was a great illustration of what that really means. I think that's what we're trying to do as a district when Mr. Sable came up with our Every Student, Every Day. We're trying to fulfill the needs of all of our students, and they may not be equal. Some students need something that another one does. But the end goal is to get them all what they need to be successful. So I just wanted to share this with the board in case they hadn't seen it. And one other thing they mentioned in these sessions were the district's taking a look at their policies to make sure that equity is reflected in our policies. And I think that's important for us to do as well so that we can strive to achieve justice and break down all of those barriers for our students. And I want to thank the district for allowing us to be able to attend that conference as well, the opportunity, and the community, because there is a lot of good things that come out of it. I know we weren't able to network as much as we normally do when we're down in Columbus, but several of the sessions did still have breakout rooms where we were able to do some networking, so I do appreciate that opportunity. The last thing I did want to mention is the foundation, Medina City Schools Foundation. Typically November is the month where they do their big dinner dessert auction, which because of the pandemic is unable to happen this year. So they are trying to figure out some alternatives to fundraising, but I did just want to make the board and the community aware that the foundation is still up and running, and if anyone is interested in joining, they can become a member of the foundation. They go to their website, there's different levels of membership, very similar to our athletic boosters, because the foundation is still providing grants for teachers and classrooms. I think there's one on the agenda tonight for a grant to Garfield. And they do provide scholarships to our students at the end of the year, our graduating seniors. So I just ask everyone to take a look at the foundation's website to learn more and reach out to them if you'd like to get involved. Thank you.
I just want to follow up on Ron's your comment about the Rec Center Advisory Committee meeting on Thursday. I've recently been in conversations with the new leadership over there who have taken over for Mike, who retired. And I just wanted to mention that they had both had mentioned about the Rec Center is looking at how they can increase their membership again or bring back those members who have not yet returned. They've been talking with the health department about how to possibly rearrange things or make it more accommodating to the different members and their different preferences of what, like with the cardio machines versus the strength training. Also, too, now that the weather's changing and the basketball season is upon us, oftentimes those courts back there in the field house are used for our basketball teams. So it was with the cardio being spread out over 2 courts, trying to consolidate some of those things. So that was interesting conversation that I had with some of them. The facilities committee met earlier this month as well. We do have an action item to approve regarding the roofing. And I just want to give a shout out to Chris and Joe McNaka for walking us through the capital improvement plan and showing how the improvements to our facilities are really being looked at, things being considered that can be pushed out a year. So again, I just wanted to thank Chris and Joe for doing that with members of the other community who come in for that facilities committee meeting. I think it's definitely getting some of their feedback as well is always good. So again, I want to welcome the public to, if they are interested in attending any of our committee meetings, to reach out and because they are more than welcome, again, recognizing that we need to make sure we keep that limit to 10 per the state orders. Okay. At this time, Mr. Chambers, I will turn it back to you for your action items.
If it please the board, it is recommended that Board of Education approve the October 2020 Treasurer's Report. Item number 2 is It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the 2025 year forecast and notes to comply with the State of Ohio Department of Education requirement. Item number 3, it is recommended that Board of Education approve the following supplemental to the 2020-2020 permanent appropriations. You'll see a new grant here, the ADAM grant. You also have a new title grant, the EOEC grant. The rest are supplementals to the former title funds and to the current title funds. Item number 4 is recommended that the Board of Education approve the following fund-to-fund transfers. We have a school store at Fenn that is no longer being used, so the principal is looking at the fund going into the principal's account. And then we have a transportation enterprise. Money's going to the general fund. The transportation does work for outside schools, and we have monies that they charge for labor we pay for already, so we have that labor charge transferred back to the general fund. Item number 5, it's recommended that Board of Education approve the following return of advances. These are all advances from prior year title grants back to the general fund. And I believe that's all.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the treasurer's action items.
I'll second.
Any comments from the board? Questions? No. Any comments or from the public, Mrs. Busby? Okay, hearing none. Mr. Chambers, roll call, please.
Ms. Pavlik?
Aye.
Ms. Parkhurst?
Aye.
Mr. Ross? Aye. Mr. Skidmore?
Aye.
Thank you.
First up is donations. There are 2 donations I'd like to point out in particular this evening. The first one is thank you to the Rosses for their generous donation of $525, which is used to award students who won the Veterans Day essay contest. In addition, I'd also like to point out the anonymous donation. Our boys football team had the opportunity to go out to Mentor in Style in nice buses, and that was due to an individual's donation in order to make that happen. So it is recommended that the Board of Education accept the following donations to the Medina City Schools. Cleveland Communications quote, it is recommended that the Board of Education approve the resolution to accept the quote from Cleveland Communications for district mobile radios and supporting equipment in the amount of $144,000. This contract is phase 2 of our transition to digital radios. We did phase 1 last year and transitioned all of our school buses over to the digital radios. This became necessary, well, first of all, because our previous radios were outdated. And secondly, the local safety departments, police, fire, ambulance, they've all transitioned to the digital system. So the digital radios allow our buildings to directly communicate with those individuals, or even for the safety forces, the police, to listen in to our district communications, which is important for safety. Number 3, policies for consideration. It is recommended that the Board of Education review for the second time with possible adoption the following revised and deleted policies. All of these policies have been reviewed multiple times through the policy committee, and all of the ones we have here are minor changes and updates. Number 4 is field trips. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the following overnight field trips in compliance with Policy 2340 for the 2021 and the 21-22 school years. I do want to point out, I'm hoping by 22 we're beyond all this COVID stuff, but I do want to point out that the first 2 for the DC trips in the spring, these are all pending the COVID situation and where we're at. We did want to make sure we're prepared in the event that we're going to be able to do those. In terms of the Spanish trip, this is not guaranteed to occur. However, they are looking for approval so they can start planning and recruiting to see if they can get the necessary students in order to take that trip. Number 5, it is recommended that the Board of Education approve the stipend payment to Wendy Clarity in the amount of $300 for being a cooperating teacher for a Notre Dame college student during the spring semester of 2020. Number 6, it is recommended that the Board of Education approve the stipend payment to Teresa Weaver in the amount of $325 and the stipend payment to Julie Condit in the amount of $375 for being cooperating teachers for Kent State University students during the spring semester 2020. Number 8, Power 4 Schools. And that is not a typo. Their name is Power Number 4 Schools. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the Power 4 Schools electric renewal agreement effective January 1st, 2022, through December 31st, 2023, at a rate of 0.03129 per kilowatt. So we're trying to lock in the rates for electricity. Seven. Number 7. I'm sorry, I skipped the wrong one. I know we had 2 that were moved. Number 7, Educational Funding Group. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the agreement between the Medina City School District and Educational Funding Group for E-rate consulting services commencing July 1st, 21 through June 30th, 24. And E-rate are federal dollars we receive for technology purposes. 9's the one I want to skip. Number 10, it is recommended that the Board of Education approve to amend the service agreement between the Medina City School District and the Educational Service Center of Medina County to provide teacher mentor services for the 2021 school year. These are much needed services. I actually just today had a conversation with Medina regarding the need for the use of these services. I do like to point out whenever this comes up is we do not do a blanket approval of our ESC agreement. So when there are adjustments that need to be made, we bring those individual items back to the board for approval. Number 11, it is recommended that the Board of Education approve to amend the service agreement between the Medina City School District and Akron Children's Hospital to provide additional clinic support for the 2021 school year. And then number 13 is personnel. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the following personnel items pending completion of all required paperwork and documentation.
I'll make a motion, we approve the superintendent's action items as stated, excluding number 10 and number 9 and 12.
I'll second.
Are there any questions or comments on the items minus 9 and 12?
I do. I just wanted to comment, thank you, Mr. Sable, for the shout out on the donation for the Veterans Day essay contest. A couple thank yous for that. First of all, working with the veterans, Colonel Taylor and American Legion Post 202, anytime that a community group can work with our kids, I mean, that's always a win for this district, whatever community group it is. And of course, this time it's a veterans group. And they love working with our kids. It's a good group to be involved with. And being a veteran, you know, myself, I'm happy to work with Colonel Taylor. And I appreciate all their help in reading the essays. I also want to thank you, Mr. Sable, for allowing the essay contest from last year to continue this year and hopefully many more years to come. And thank you for that. That's much appreciated. And a huge, huge thank you has to go to Amy Busby. because the idea was presented, and then Amy took the ball and ran with it and made it happen last year and even made it better this year. So really appreciate Amy's hard work on that. And again, hopefully we can continue to partner with the American Legion Post 202 and continue to do this for several more years. So again, thank you, Amy and Aaron, for that.
Ron, I would just like to personally thank you as well for your donation. I mean, you're right. It truly is when we get that multi-generational interaction going, that really is what a true community is. So I want to thank you for being a driving force behind that. And Amy, I know. Because not only are you generous with your time serving the district, but as well as your wallet. So thank you. Okay. Mr. Sable, I just had a couple questions. Regarding the field trips, I know we're approving these. I know we had to cancel the China trip. Were all the families whose students were scheduled for that, were they able to secure a refund? I know that the district was working with the travel agency to try to get that.
Yeah, and we didn't just have the China trip that was canceled. We had several trips canceled last year, including, I think the other one was New York for the choir. It really depended on individual situations with families, whether they bought the insurance for the trip. The travel companies that we work with were very understanding, and obviously the situation has cost them money as well. But we were able to work to secure refunds, partial refunds, or in some cases, carryover, where those funds could be used for the next time that the trip is taken.
Thank you. I definitely encourage any families who are doing those types of trips. The travel companies offer travel insurance that will reimburse or cover for those situations. Definitely a good idea. And then I had another question on the educational funding group regarding how much is saved by the district when we outsource that, and is there any staff on hand or on staff who could do it?
Yeah, and I'm going to ask Ryan to reply to that as he directly deals with this. But I do know in my side dealings with it that it's a very complicated process with quite a amount of money that if it's not utilized properly, we would use. So.
Yeah, and that's why we use them. We utilize their experience in navigating the expense that we could either lose or incur because of not filing paperwork correctly or getting the refunds directed back to the right spot. It is E-rate's a 50% match for Medina, so it's crucial that we get those dollars and make sure that we do that process correctly. So that's why we use the educational funding group.
Great. Thank you for providing that. And I was going to ask you about that percentage because I was doing some reading up on that. And some districts get as little as 5% and other districts get as much as 90%. So that's great to hear that we get 50%
Yeah, it is
refund.
nice that we fall right in the middle because
Yeah.
there are districts that have, like you said, almost, it's close to 100% reimbursement, which is nice.
Mhm. Okay. Thank you. Are there any other questions on these action items from the board? No? Mrs. Busby, is there any public comment? Okay. Hearing none, Mr. Chambers?
Mr. Ross? Aye. Mr. Skidmore?
Aye.
Ms. Parkhurst?
Aye.
Pardon me?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. And Ms. Pavlik?
Aye.
Thank you.
I'm going to go ahead and move on with the agenda and then come back to the two items at the end that were moved. H, it is recommended that the Board of Education approve the contract with Taylor Consulting Group LLC listed for roof replacement projects to include design, bidding, and construction services at 8% of construction budget. And this is actually the contract that Mrs. Pavlik had mentioned at the top of the meeting. This is annual work that needs to be completed on the roofs, and again, this has all gone through the District Facilities Committee.
I'll make a motion to accept the action item H, the contract for Taylor Consulting Group.
Second?
Are there any questions or comments by the board?
I have a question. So on this particular contract, I know there's different buildings that we're repairing or replacing the roof for, and it seems like we're always replacing roof at the high school, which I know it is a large building, and I think even Canavan had some sections completed last year. So is it because of prior replacements and the amount of the warranty? Is that why we don't just do one whole building and 1 year we break it up, just to clarify?
Yep. No, I think that's a good question. Yeah, things like roofs and paving, they're very similar. So we on a yearly basis, need to do things to update, upgrade, repair roofs as well as paving. So in order to be fiscally responsible, rather than changing or redoing an entire roof like you might do on your house, we do it by sections based off of need. So they will actually take a look at the roof. They'll do a study. They dig holes in the roof to look at the layers and see what kind of shape the different layers are in, and then make recommendations on areas for repair. So we do that on an annual rotating basis throughout the district.
Thank you for clarifying, because I think sometimes as people drive through the community and they see, well, weren't they just working on this building last year? And so that's insightful. Thank you for sharing that.
So it was interesting in the Facilities Committee meeting that they presented and they showed from the top down in the different sections of the high school and where those sections are in relation to where you look at roof section D. What part is roof section D? And they were able to show that. So that was neat. Mr. Sable, I do have one quick question. The page 3 chart lists probable cost and includes a 5% contingency amount. And that's what the 8% of the consultant fee is based on. If the construction cost comes in lower, does this contract amount also decrease?
Yeah, typically the percentages received are based off of what the actual winning bid ends up being.
Thank you for clarifying that. Is there any public comment on this item, Mrs. Busby? No. Hearing none. Mr. Chambers, if you'll call roll call.
No suspense, I'm sorry. Ms. Pavlik?
Aye.
Mr. Ross? Aye. Ms. Parkhurst?
Aye.
Mr. Skidmore?
Aye.
Thank you.
And letter I is a personnel item. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the following co-curricular appointment. This is separated out because it is for a fall sport for assistant volleyball coach. So this individual has already fulfilled this contract. The reason why it's on the agenda now rather than before the fall season is because there were some issues out of the state in terms of this individual's licensure, which was beyond their control. They sent their information to the wrong district. So we don't recommend it to the board until we have their paperwork in hand.
I'll make a motion to approve action item I.
I'll second. No additional comments from the board. Mrs. Busby, public participation? Hearing none. Mr. Chambers, roll call, please.
Mr. Ross?
Aye.
Ms. Pavlik?
Aye.
Ms. Parkhurst?
Aye.
Mr. Skidmore?
Aye.
Thank you.
And number 9, membership agreement. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the membership agreement between the Medina City School District and Battelle for Kids for participation in the SOAR network in the amount of $9,500 during the 2021 school year. SOAR is a program that we began participating in last school year. The board actually approved approximately a $25,000 to $28,000 contract. They work directly with us in regards to transitioning to 21st century learning, teaching, and instruction. They also provide us a statewide and national network. We actually just nationally participated in virtual professional development approximately a month ago, and had the opportunity to talk to districts from across the country on how they're dealing with COVID and how they're getting through things. A couple things I do want to point out is this is a decreased contract because I was not going to recommend the $28,000 this year with some of the reductions we were working on making with the COVID situation. Was able to work with Battelle to get an obviously greatly decreased rate. Big part of why we've been able to get that decreased is because a lot of the meetings that we're doing are virtual and not in person, where in the past we've actually visited other school districts. Superintendents have anyways visited other school districts as well as the Battelle educational facilities. When I originally brought this up with the board, it was an $8,000 contract. It's a $9,500 one because I think it's important that Dr. Kwolek participates in this program as assistant superintendent, and even more so as the interim high school principal. Jeff Harrison, our former high school principal, did participate in the program last year.
I'll make a motion to approve this action item.
A second.
I did have a question, and one of the reasons that I asked for this to be broken out, when I was looking through the agreement, the overview, I'm sorry, the membership overview, and on the second page, under the planning and building design team, and it stated about moving from a portrait of a graduate for implementing their vision, the portrait of a graduate. And I know that we don't have a portrait of a graduate now, so I was wondering why the cost and the timing when I was looking at the calendar too, which was on page, or the timeline, I'm sorry. The timeline stating that in October and November. So I was hoping for additional clarification on that because how can we work on something that we don't have yet? So.
In regards to the timeline, those timelines are flexible. We're in cohort 2 of the SOAR program. So there's approximately, I want to say, 10 to 12 other districts that are part of that cohort. Every district is in a different place in their planning process. The focus of year 2 is how you take that portrait and actually implement it instructionally, which is what we had talked about last year when we were looking at the portrait. So we are already having professional development of how we will work aspects, even though we don't know what the portrait is yet, but work that within our strategic plan and as well as our classroom, which actually directly relates to the next item.
So are all of the school districts in cohort 2 then, they are in the beginning stages of their portrait? Is that what I'm hearing?
It varies. Some districts in cohort 2 have had a portrait for several years. Some districts just completed theirs the end of last year. Other districts are right where we're at, where they're in the process this year of completing their portrait.
Do any other board members have any questions or comments on this item?
I'm excited for us to get through this process of the strategic planning and the portrait of a graduate, and then unpacking and assessing and getting our competencies developed as a result of that portrait. It's something exciting and to look forward to right now with everything else that's going on.
That's not COVID related. Yes. Mrs. Busby, is there any public comment on this item? Hearing none, Mr. Chambers, if you'll call roll call.
Ms. Parkhurst,
Aye.
Mr. Ross,
Aye.
Mr. Skidmore,
Aye.
Ms. Pavlik.
Aye.
Thank you.
Sorry. Item number 12, amend the impact group service agreement. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve to amend the service agreement between the Medina City School District and the impact group to provide strategic planning services. Last year, the board had approved approximately a $25,000 contract for the impact group to assist us with that portrait process, the creation of the portrait process, which included community meetings as well as the actual development of the product and surveys. Since then, with what's happened with COVID, we thought it appropriate to work on our strategic plan as well. As we mentioned in the previous item, they really are two things that go hand in hand. Technically, we do have one more year left of our strategic plan. However, I feel like we are far enough with the process where we've completed or even done more than was actually in that plan. So for $11,000, that allows for an addition to the portrait, but also our new strategic plan. The goal is to have both of those completed at the end of the school year. For me, timing couldn't be better, simply because I'm looking forward to a fresh step next year post-COVID. So as a district, we'll really have a new direction that we're going to be looking with all of this planning. We will still continue to have community meetings as part of this process. Most of those meetings will be held virtually. That was initially a concern of mine as we had discussions as to whether to proceed this year or wait till next year when we get people back together. I have talked to other school districts that have gone through one or both of these processes during the COVID shutdowns, and actually had a lot of positive feedback of getting more people than they would typically get if they're in session, simply because of the convenience of parents and community members being able to just log in before or after dinner and take part in the process.
I'll make a motion to approve this action item.
Second?
Do any of the board members have any questions or comments on this?
I just question, Mr. Stable. You said the other districts had success with this, but you're saying with their strategic planning, they used this actual company, Impact Group?
They use the impact group or they use Patel for Kids is the two districts I've talked to.
Okay.
So Battelle, because we're working with them with SOAR, was another company we looked at to potentially provide us some support. However, it's much more cost effective with the impact group.
Thank you.
Aaron, on the strategic plan extension package proposal, it says the impact group will need to also complete the following. So these virtual focus groups are in addition to the portrait focus groups, correct?
Correct.
Now, are they looking to piggyback these, or are they looking to get different groups of people, or are they going to do like the portrait from 6 to 7 p.m. and then the strategic plan from 7 to 8?
No, I anticipate there's going to be direct crossover between the two as they directly relate. They're going to hold multiple sessions to try and reach different components of our community, whether it's parents, businesses, and they're also going to hold focus groups which are not going to include district personnel. And the purpose of doing that is to have a very open environment where parents can safely share and say exactly what they want to say. And then they report that information back to us without individuals' names. So it's to try and get real, true feedback. Not that we don't now, but.
You'd be surprised.
Mr. Sable, remind me also, because it has been a while and we have been consumed with a lot of COVID the last few months, but I was thinking that the original contract that we talked about way back when, weren't they also going to work into possibly questions related to redistricting and a bond and that type of thing too, or am I thinking of something else?
No, they were going to play a minor role in terms of the bond issue. The architectural firm that the board approved does have a communications department that we were working directly with a lot of those communications. The impact group would have provided some additional assistance just because we've had a long-term relationship with the impact group. They're the company that has historically worked with us on our community newsletters and things like that. They also were going to not redo the strategic plan with us, but they were going to clean it up and give it a facelift so it represented where we were at.
I just want to comment. When we did the strategic plan the first time, it was very engaging. I learned a lot from that process. And so I'm excited. I'm just commenting. I'm looking forward to going through it again with this format and seeing where it takes us. So it's going to be interesting. But I use Mrs. Parker's. It's exciting to see what our future is going to be about. So thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Busby, is there any public participation? You're nodding your head yes?
The question is, can we advise the total amount of funds going to the impact group?
Can you repeat that, please?
The question is, what are the total funds going to the impact group?
Yeah, just off the top of my head, this contract is approximately a $35,000 contract, of which 25 of it was approved last year, so it's an $11,000 increase. We, at one time, used the impact group extensively for community staff newsletters, also for our quality profile that we create on an annual basis. Most of those costs, which came out of the communications department in my last 5 years, have been absorbed by Ms. Busby, and they're handling much of that work internally, or have transitioned it from paper materials to digital materials. You may have seen some of the changes in our recent newsletters. So we do still utilize them. They assist us with things like the quality profile, which is our own report card that we distribute to realtors or people new to the district. So we want to make sure that not that Amy doesn't do a very professional job, but that's what they do.
Mrs. Busby, is there any other? Okay. Hearing no more. Mr. Chambers?
Ms. Parkhurst,
Aye.
Mr. Ross,
Aye.
Mr. Skidmore,
Aye.
and Ms. Pavlik.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay. We'll now move to the public participation part of the meeting. Community members wishing to address the board are asked to abide by the following guidelines. Attendees shall register their intention to participate in the public portion of the meeting upon their arrival at the meeting. After those that have registered have spoken, if time allows, the board president will ask for public participation from all other attendees. Please state your name, address, and affiliation. Please keep comments to a maximum of 3 minutes. No participant may speak more than once on the same topic unless all others who wish to speak on that topic have been heard. All statements shall be directed to the presiding officer. No person may address or question board members individually. I do want to say one quick comment on this to follow up to what Mr. Skidmore had stated earlier. I know with the move to the virtual format and in trying with all of the transition between online with the COVID and the information, a lot of confusion, that in the past Mr. Sable has answered questions at this section of the meeting, but perhaps, Mr. Sable, if you can correct me if I'm wrong, this is the part of the meeting where the public can address the board. It's typically not intended to be a Q&A, though we've used that in that format in the past. So if you could speak a little bit on that.
Yep, the section, and this is the same for all board meetings, at least in Ohio, it's called public comment rather than question and answer. I do know that our board has worked hard to have clear communication with the community. I think that with COVID, many of the questions we've received, this has been a good opportunity for us to follow up with some of our community members or our parents to provide them information in regards to what's happening, but technically it's a comment section.
Thank you. Mrs. Busby, is there any public comment?
We do not have anyone.
Okay, thank you. I believe originally we had an executive session scheduled, but that is no longer required, correct?
Yeah, we anticipated a personnel update that due to the COVID situation hasn't occurred, so
Okay.
we don't have an update.
Okay. Okay. Then I make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
Ms. Pavlik,
Aye.
I'm getting it to Mr. Skidmore.
Aye.
Ms. Parkhurst,
Aye.
Mr. Ross.
Aye.
Thank you.